Welcome to some new r/malicious compliance stories, where people comply to the letter, but not the spirit of a request. I hope you had a great day. Thanks for all the likes and comments on the last video. If you would like to support this channel, please hit the like button and consider subscribing if you enjoy the content. And now, let's start with the first story. It's called Free Pies. This happened many years ago, when grocery stores were closed on Christmas and Thanksgiving. I worked for a small chain of grocery stores in the mid-Atlantic in the Delhi. A day before Thanksgiving, the bakery manager asked if anybody from our department would be willing to stay and work all night just baking pumpkin pies for orders. We were open the day before Thanksgiving till 4 and then closed on Thanksgiving. I volunteered as I was a college student on Thanksgiving break. I came to work that night and was left a note about temps, timing and packaging, but no quantities. This made me nervous, so I called the manager at home and said, "How many pies do you want me to bake?" She told me to keep baking until she came in. And I questioned that, asking how many pies exactly do you want me to make? She, obviously irritated, told me that I didn't need to worry about how many and just keep cooking until she came in at 5. Okay, cue malicious compliance. I loaded a 6-wheeler cart with frozen pies, put them on trays and started baking. As the pies were baking, I prepped racks ahead of time and folded boxes while the pies cooled. I was a logistical savant. Everything went perfectly, and I was a machine operating at optimal efficiency. By the time she came in at 5, I had cooked every pumpkin pie in her freezer. She lost it. What the heck is going on? What am I supposed to do with all these pies? You cooked over 400 pies, and I only have orders for 100. The store manager, hearing the commotion, came over and asked what was going on. She said, "She cooked every pie we have in the store, even the Christmas ones. What am I supposed to do with all these pies?" He asked, "Why did you cook all the pies?" And I told him, "She told me to." He asked her if that was true, and she said, "No." Well, I told her to keep cooking till I got here, but nobody's ever cooked that many before. I didn't even think it would be close. "Then this is on you," he replied and walked away. The best part was that since we were closed the next day, the employees were allowed to take all the leftover bakery items home with them. I took home 10 pumpkin pies and multiple bags of bread and rolls. Every other employee in the store was very grateful. The next story is called Archive Compliance. I work in the administration of a fairly large county in Europe. My field is archives and the daily running of the administration archives. But seeing as the county is in charge of running many schools in the area, we also have a responsibility for the archives in the schools. Now, these archives will contain all kinds of information about students, staff, school, etc. For large schools, the archives can get rather big. All the way back in 2010, there was a shift. A new archive system was brought in, and this was revolutionary, as this was going to be fully electronic. No more paper to be packed in boxes and stuffed in shelves. In this process, there were also discussions around if the administration was going to take over the archives of the schools and the running of those. The schools kinda panicked and dug their heels into the ground. It was very important that they owned the archives and kept owning them. Probably due to a fear of getting fewer resources over the next couple of budgets, but probably also some kind of fear of not having control over the archives. The response from the schools was such an overwhelmingly no that it was decided not to push through. Schools were to still own their own archives and also have full control of the new electronic archives, with the administration there as support in issuing general guidelines, etc. Now, some nerdy stuff you need to know about archives. There are a couple of complex and very detailed laws surrounding the stuff. First, with regard to the archive rooms. Building a certified archive room is expensive as heck. And it also messes with the general infrastructure of the building, as there can be no piping in the vicinity. Ventilation has to be better than everywhere else to make sure mold doesn't happen, etc. Also, the archives need to be neatly ordered. There can be no paper clips or anything like that on the paper. Staples are okay. And no plastic folders. Folders need to be of a certain paper and boxes as well, so they don't damage the paper. Boxes also need to be of a certain shape and form, etc. The law regarding this field also states that any material older than 20 years shall be placed in a depot with a proper archive room. Those of you that have any legal background know that if the law says shall, you have no way to get around it. We have one certified depot in the county where we can hand off paper archives. No school has a certified archive room. Now, you'd think that the schools would understand this and make the due diligence as they put things in the archive. Spoiler alert, they didn't. You'd also think they'd follow the laws and start handing off material that was older than 20 years. Spoiler alert, didn't do that either. So onwards to today. Schools are feeling the pressure to hand off the old material because they need the space. Turns out very few have done any work on the material these last 10 years, and some of the archives go back to the 40s or earlier. They either need to spend hundreds of hours cleaning up the archives themselves, or they need to pay a good ton of money to others to tidy it up for them. Also, there are some that have been unlucky enough to get mold in the archives, which needs to be handled, and that's expensive as heck. The cost could have been offloaded on the administration in 2010, but instead it was so important to keep the archives that they now have to pay millions to get everything sorted. The third story is called 1,000 Checks. A notorious laboratory services company has a penchant for overcharging by a few dollars for what should be a contracted fee. In most states, lab services are not a copay item and are included in the service for a doctor. Typically, an insurer will pay between $25 to $30 for common lab work. They typically overcharge just enough to cause a small residual charge to remain, normally less than $5 US. Interestingly enough, they will send to collections for such a small amount. Repeated talks to billing to resolve this issue would go nowhere. The person on the other end said, not her problem. So tired of this residual cost, that is not always known upfront either, and tired of giving out my CC number for a phantom charge later, I decided to fight back. I had a condition that required multiple checks for common blood work come up. Each and every week I went in and declined to offer my credit card, stating you will need to bill me. They would try not to serve me without. Whereas I knew the law, and they had to offer me a fixed price for services and a cash way to pay and settle that day. Without a fixed price, they couldn't, and were required by law to bill later. Sending a bill costs money, about $2 to $5 US. I would then promptly overpay said bill by exactly $10.68, the minimum amount required by law to remit within 30 days. Sending a check costs anywhere from $4 to $20 US. And medical repayments require a hyper-compliant processor, so on the high end. So a cost of $25 to $30 for me to be billed and a repayment check issued. I did this for 6 months and figure it cost them $700 to $800 US. Being the only game in town, waiting became an issue. Others were just as hesitant to offer a credit card for payment, and it is common knowledge about collections from this company for trivial charges. I, therefore, explained the rule of law, showing the statutes and how to complain if they violate them, and how to get back at them. I figure in 26 weeks I had nearly 100 persons enjoy the malicious nature of this and decide to apply the rule of law. So $70 to $80K US in costs associated with crappy billing practices that I was aware of. I don't know how many of my conspirators got to go along with it, but I was approached by someone telling me to do the same thing. The next time I had blood work was another series of tests, and I was fully ready to go another round of malicious check writing. But something amazing happened. Not only was the billing correct, but was completely covered by insurance. They no longer asked for a credit card number and seemed to be in line. Service improved at the lab, so wait times went down since they were not worried about billing anymore. One tech made the offhand remark that some lady was fired at the billing group and a new person straightened them out within a few weeks. The last story is called Mandatory Overtime Compliance. A few years back, I was working for a work truck manufacturing company. I really enjoyed the work I was doing, and I was good at it. Unfortunately, this place had, and still does have, a reputation as a revolving door due to the disposable view they have of their techs. We were referred to as a heartbeat and tools at one point by the general manager. The turnover led to a severe imbalance in experienced versus inexperienced workforce, and it was compounded by their answer to production slowdowns. They fired the bottom 20% every winter and would hire new techs with zero experience and mandatory overtime every summer. I have always stood by the adage, I work to live, I don't live to work, meaning I don't care for overtime. I budgeted my life to be able to turn down overtime when offered. I'm a team player and will always do my part when needed. However, this pattern of seasonal forced overtime was starting to rear thin. At one point, the company was bought out by a large corporation and some of our HR policies changed. One change was overtime being calculated on a daily basis instead of weekly. Another change was having 10 unpaid personal days with no reason or notice required to use them. Of course, the average underpaid tech living paycheck to paycheck would never use an unpaid personal day. The company knew that, and it was strictly for PR. They could claim that employees had personal days, even though they never intended for us to use them. It didn't take long for me to realize something. With a forced 9.5-hour day, if they worked us 10, they would be required to give us another paid break. And overtime calculated daily, I could call in on Fridays. I would use my unpaid personal day, but still come out ahead. 32 regular hours plus 6 overtime hours equals the equivalent of 41 regular hours. I decided I had enough and I was going to enjoy 10 3-day weekends for my summer. After my third Friday off, I was called into my manager's office. My manager, his manager and the HR director were waiting for me. I was confronted about taking 3 Fridays off in a row and they demanded an explanation or excuse as to why I was taking them off. I calmly referred to our employee handbook, which explains that no excuse or reason is required for personal days. They asked how I could afford to use these unpaid personal days. I had nothing to hide, so I explained the math, much to their surprise. I was then lectured by management, who told me I was abusing the system and I needed to stop, or else. The HR director immediately corrected them and told management there was nothing they could do because I was not breaking any rules. At that point, I was pretty heated. I told them, I am one of your top performers, and I know it. If I am disciplined or fired, I will assume it's because of this meeting, and I will seek legal counsel. I've not broken any rules, and you should be grateful I haven't pointed out this loophole to the other techs. I got one more Friday off before mandatory overtime was discontinued. I found out later that the general manager was reprimanded when he tried taking the issue to corporate. They found out he was forcing overtime, which was against the corporate policy. The following year, the 10 unpaid days were turned into 2 extra vacation days. And with that, we end today's video. Let me know what you think about the stories. On a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate the stories and today's video? I hope you enjoyed the video. If you like what I do and want to support me, please subscribe and hit the like button. I hope you have a great day. Stay safe. Bye bye.